I'm happy to welcome Ben Gucciardi. He is the author of the chapbook, I Asked My Sister's Ghost, published by Diagram New Michigan Press 2020, brand new book. Ben's poems have appeared in Agni, Alaska Quarterly Review, Best New Poets, Harvard Review, New Ohio Review, Orion Magazine, and other journals. He's the winner of the Iron Horse Literary Review's Trifecta Poetry Prize, the Milton Kessler Memorial Prize from Harper Pallet, and a Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Prize. In addition to writing, Ben works with refugee and immigrant youth in Oakland. Please welcome Ben Gucciardi.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And thank you so much for having us and all you do to organize this space. I had the pleasure of reading with Sandy in Half Moon Bay. I think it was about a year ago, maybe a bit more. Time is definitely confusing for me right now. And also, Francesca, that was stunning reading. Thank you so much for sharing. I love those poems, and I'm really excited to read more of your work. I'm hoping it's not too dark here. I don't have overhead lights in my office. I just have these lamps, but I'm just gonna get right into it. This first poem I'm gonna read is called Type 2. Type 2. 5 times a day, I prick my finger and ask my blood about its failure. Out of its cage, it wants to discuss its better cages. How, before it was mine, it lived inside a python near Varanasi. The thrill of rushing when muscle snaps a rabbit's spine. How it wants to paint a self-portrait as the Ganges River. In the foreground, a woman in a yellow sari cleanses her son's limp body. His skin, the color of the river. The river, the color of her eyes. That's how holy I am, it says, as I turn the meter off, trash the strip, and choose a new tract to stick the insulin in. The python uncoils from its catch, slinks beneath a rusty harrow. The woman weaves marigolds in her son's wet hair, climbs beside him on the bamboo board. The current ferries them off the canvas, stretched over blue tile. Marigolds spill into my hamper, crimson petals on the bathroom floor. So this a lot of these poems I'm reading are from this chapbook I just put out, and they're dealing specifically with the death of my sister. She passed away when I was 22. She was 26, and some of them will sort of be in that addressed to her. But this is a poem here called Advice for Pallbearers. To make the sound of your footsteps disappear requires practice. A cornfield in late autumn when the ground is brittle enough to repeat what it hears. Best if the 6 of you can go together at dusk. Find a barn owl. A corn crow will do. See how close you can get before the bird startles. Observe the interaction of air and wing. Before you handle the casket, borrow your mother's finest crystal vase. Carry it through the crowding parking lot to the water park. Ride the slides. Let nothing shatter. The trick is for the coffin to appear to float. The weight of his failures superfluous. Let him be known as a saint for a few moments before he is forgotten. So this is a poem called Prayer for the Instant City. In the makeshift mosque, 24 men kneel, heads pressed to the straw carpet. In white linen, khaki slacks, They bend like egrets in the shallows, stalking God's love. That sweet, rasping toad. Look at the marks on their foreheads, Hassan tells me, as we begin our shift. You can see who prays the most. We are delivering tents for the hundreds that arrive from Homs, Aleppo, the villages between. A camp becomes a city the way a wound becomes a scar. Beside their fathers, the smallest boys pray. I have never seen my father bow, but once in the woods, after my sister's death, he called the ground up to him. Eyes closed, leaning into filtered light, the leaves and the soil came. The ants crawled across his prayer. The Arabic script tilts. Each hymn a calligraphy of ships the imam steers, his voice like water slapping the hull. A call, braided voices answer. By you we enter the morning. By you we enter the evening. The ship's wake widens into silence. When we were children, my sister buried my father to the neck in sand. He smiled as her yellow pail emptied on his chest. I placed a chipped white limpet over each of his eyes. When you don't read these poems for a while, sometimes you forget what they hold. So just sometimes get a little bit emotional. This next poem is called "I Ask My Sister's Ghost How Her Days Are Now." Say that again. I ask my sister's ghost how her days are now. Do you remember those picture books? She replies, where the illustrator removes the outer wall of a jumbo jet to show children where luggage goes, how the pilot's levers connect to wings, where cross-section diagrams reveal the way smoke escapes through stacks in a sugar factory, the 400 yellow-tipped missiles a warship's hull can hold, and how in some diagrams you could find a bathroom in the schema and a nail-sized man with blue pants around his ankles, reading the paper while quietly shitting. I feel just like that man now, doing my business, everyone oblivious to my presence. And if by chance they see me, they chuckle, as if my lone role is to make light of the pain on the pilot's face, the underpaid laborers threshing cane, the Marines playing ping pong as the turrets open and we rain down hellfire on the next village where the word for beauty sounds just like the word for camel, and the phrase I borrowed sometimes means I burned. So this next poem I'm going to read is a little bit lighter, and it's a poem called Salve Regina. They thumbed up from Santa Ana that morning for a job with the Catholic worker smearing mustard under pastrami, stacking iceberg on Dutch crunch, passing sandwiches and seltzer to the residents of the third largest encampment beneath the 880. Rufo was more handsome, but it was Faustine whose voice most effortlessly dwelled in the 15th century basilica their singing built in the middle of the room when, after an hour of receptive silence, they sat back to back, plainclothes friars chanting ecclesiastic Latin. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. What did I know? I was merely one of many confusing Marx with Hegel gathered that night to hear a Sioux elder share news from Standing Rock at the Canticle Farm in East Oakland, which, that time of year, was ringed by lemon trees bursting into yellow prayer. Come morning, Rufo and I would pack citrus in 3 wicker baskets for the elder to drive back across the plains. As I pressed my nose to rind, Rufo told me how each morning his father dusted chili on sliced lemon, how anything could be a sacrament if you held it right. Just keeping an eye on the clock. Gonna read a couple more poems. I ask my sister's ghost to take me with her. Not because the reefs are bleaching, because I want to see how thin the veil is. To row behind her in the boat she came in, row all day into night, and where the river turns to delta, blade my oar to beach the dinghy on a bank of silt and cattail. Because I want to hide with her in midnight swaying, turn my ears from the throng of bullfrogs to the song she hums, listens to her stories of its blind composer, how he charmed wives at the royal parties in Dublin, his fingers sweeping each glissando, his eyes clouded over like a cod on ice. There is a Chinese symbol she taught me for a word that has no word, but I can never remember how to draw it, what tone to put in my throat when I speak it. The inked shape of that mutable mark hangs just beyond the last branch of my mind as she turns to leave. There is nothing I can say to convince her to take me, so I pluck the tongue from my mouth and lay it flat on a stone. When she bends to inspect the petal, it becomes a red door. It creaks as she opens it, walks into the unspoken without turning back. So this is a newer poem I wrote during the post coronavirus world. It's a poem called Little Accents. Kandinsky, as the war raged on, turned away from severity towards a brighter palette. The lavishness of purple as Warsaw was reduced to rubble. Not stubborn, just greedy, Jack Gilbert said of his self-imposed exile on Monolithos. I envy his poems, their pictures of Greek honey. We despise in others what we are ashamed of in ourselves. Koalas on fire, the biblical spread of the virus, and me paddling out at the point break, practicing trimeter. Little accents, wild iris under redwood in the rain. I kneel to touch the brushwork. And I'll just finish with this one more poem here. It's also a newer poem. Sorry, I moved some things around here. So outside of poetry, I work with young people who have just recently arrived to the Bay Area, a lot of times leaving some difficult circumstances. And this is a poem about that work. It's called The Rungs, like the rungs on a ladder. Only the person with the green dice should be talking, I remind the boys, holding up the oversized foam cubes. And the others should be listening, Kay says. And how should we listen? Con el corazón, M replies, thumping his chest with his closed fist. That's right, I say, with the heart. Who wants to start? The dice are passed around the circle and the boys gloss over the check-in question. When they reached B, who walked here unaccompanied from Honduras 3 months ago, he holds them like boulders. We straighten when his lip begins to quiver. It's not my place to tell you what he shared that day, but I can tell you how M put his hand on B's back and said, Mahe, desahogarte, which translates roughly to undrown yourself, though no English phrase so willingly accepts that everyone has drowned, and that we can reverse that gasping, expel the fluids from our lungs. I sit quietly as the boys make with their bodies the rungs of a ladder, and B climbs up from the current, sits in the sun for a few good moments before he jumps back in. The dice finish the round and we are well over time. I resist the urge to speak about rafts, what it means to float. Good, I tell them, let's go back to class. After handshakes and side hugs, I'm left alone in a small room. 2 fruit punch Starburst wrappers on the ground and a box of unopened tissues. Thank you all so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing all the everybody read in the open mic. And again, thank you so much, Sandy, for organizing. It's so kind of you to have us, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to share with you all.
You are welcome, Ben. That was incredible reading.